We all love to find that new next great thing, the top prospect that's going to catapult our fantasy team to the top of the standings. Lucky enough to have Chris Crawford with us, who follows this stuff 24/7. He's got his top 20 fantasy prospects for 2020. That's a lot of 20s right there. But you did the work, and so let's take a look at the list here, because these are the players that you think will have the biggest impact on fantasy teams this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good year for this. There's a lot of prospects who have a chance to make an impact this year. Starts off number one, Luis Robert is a guy who has a chance to provide fantasy relevance in every category. He's a guy who makes a lot of hard contact at every part of the field, going to hit homers, going to steal bases, an electric athlete. Obviously, his fantasy value increased, too, by signing that 6-year, $50 million contract. That automatically makes him qualified to play Major League Baseball, I guess. There's no service time manipulation that can happen there. So he's going to be a guy who has a chance to hit near the top of the lineup, or even if he hits at the bottom of the lineup. That White Sox lineup is loaded. There's going to be plenty of chances for him to drive runs. If I have one little concern, he might not have a great on-base percentage, but going to help in all the other categories. Gavin Lux is more of that high-floor guy, a guy who's going to play shortstop or second base for the Dodgers, almost assuredly second base. Long-term could be a shortstop. Does everything well. So he's the type of guy who can help in every category. And then Joe Adell, the guy who's probably going to be starting in the minor leagues. He's a guy that I think he's going to probably make his move over to the majors later. Adell will say hello from the other side.
Okay.
I'm very, very sorry.
You warned us.
Yeah, I did warn you that I was going to do that. His upside competes with any prospect in all of baseball. Bad pun aside, he is really a guy who has a chance to be an impact player in a really good Angel lineup, an undervalued Angels lineup. I can see all three helping fantasy lineups very easily.
Do you guys have an Adele pun that you'd like to throw in there, too?
I'd rather not.
Yeah. Just pretend it didn't happen.
Come back to me.
Yeah,
You're getting Adele at some point this year.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. DJ, what do you when you're looking at that top 10 from Chris there, who stands out to you?
Carter Kieboom with me. And it looked like he had a clear path to at-bats after Anthony Rendon signed with the Angels, but there's sort of uncertainty about that now because the Nationals have so many moving pieces. Howie Kendrick, Starlin Castro, Asdrubal Cabrera, all in that mix between second and third base. Still, I think Kieboom warrants watching. Kind of struggled in a small sample last year. I would certainly not hold that against him at all. Shown the ability to hit for average, get on base, provide pop in the minors. Had a really good showing in AAA after being sent down by the Nationals last year. And I don't think the Nationals' offseason moves indicate anything about their future, about his future, or their confidence in him. He's going to come up at some point this year if he doesn't even make the opening day roster. He might, and I think he's going to be worth picking up in fantasy leagues right away.
Versatility helping all these prospects. If you can play them around the diamond, that'll help. Could help Carter here as well. Let's take a look at 11 through 20. So this is Chris Crawford's top 20 prospects of 2020 for fantasy baseball. And Drew, who jumps out at you from this second list?
Well, I'm going to be rolling in the deep here.
There we go.
With Dylan Carlson, Cardinals' top outfield prospect. Could be an interesting player, I think, for 2020 fantasy purposes. There would seem to be an open spot in left field there for him in St. Louis. The Cardinals did not make a very strong effort to bring back Marcell Ozuna, who signed a relatively inexpensive 1-year, $18 million contract with the Braves in free agency. I don't think Carlson will make the opening day roster unless he signs one of those Luis Robert type pre-arbitration, pre-service time extensions.
Right.
Because the Cardinals want to game his service time and get an extra year of free agency. It's how modern baseball teams work. But
unfortunately,
Carlson has that intriguing skill set. There's an opportunity there. He had 26 homers, 20 steals last year between AA Springfield and AAA Memphis. Also a 292 average, 914 OPS. Is he going to be like a standout guy like Joe Adell long term? I don't know, but that power speed combo, and he just seems like a really polished player for only being 21 years old. I think he can make an impact this year if he somehow wins that left field job, even if it's in April or May.
Absolutely, and he's a guy who would have ranked higher. I assumed, and this is what happens when you assume, I assumed that the Cardinals were going to bring in a player like a Nick Castellanos or a Marcell Ozuna to play in the outfield. I think his stock actually does go up because the opportunity is clearly there.
So outside of Dylan Carlson from the Cardinals, Chris, when you take a look at this list here, who do you think is most likely from 11 to 20 to have a very, very big impact? Who could jump up and really help you in 2020?
You know, Dustin May is the name that I think that really has a chance to really help you in that next list. He's a pitcher who the Dodgers have that starting rotation that don't necessarily provide a ton of opportunity early, but I think Dustin May is just one of their best starters, and because of that, he's going to have that chance to be in that group. Going to miss bats, throws a ton of strikes. A really impressive ability to command his stuff for somebody who's that young, and that's something that you always pay attention. Maybe a better real-life pitcher than a fantasy pitcher because may not miss the same type of bats as like a Mackenzie Gore potentially could do later on, but still going to provide enough missed bats and initiate enough weak contact to be fantasy relevant.
You think about these Dodgers starters too. There's injury risks in there. They brought back Alex Wood, for example, Julio Urias. They're going to always watch his workload. Of course, Clayton Kershaw with the back problem. So they have numbers right now. They have a ton of starters, but I think there's going to be room for a lot of them.
And so here's the issue that I always have because I get super excited about the prospects here,
yes.
DJ. Where do you draft him, right? You got a guy like Robert who's number 1 on the list, and Eloy Jimenez said he's the next Mike Trout. And I go, okay, I want to take him in the first round if you hear that. But how high should you reach for some of these guys?
I mean, you hear about all the buzz during spring training especially, and it elevates these guys. And a good example last year, Fernando Tatis Jr., and yeah, we were hearing how impressive he was in camp, but I was still like, you know what, I'm not going to draft him. He's not going to make the opening day roster, and then he did.
Yeah. Yes.
So you never really know. So if you're late in a draft, like the replacement level value is there. So if you want to take a chance on one of these younger guys, it's not going to lose you that much if you don't end up getting someone with an established spot in the line.
There are other cases where they get overdrafted.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally.
Vlad Jr. In his going into his rookie year was like a 5th round guy.
Sure.
Sometimes I saw him as high as the 3rd round. Like we've said, not every prospect is going to be Juan Soto or Ronald Acuna Jr. You got to be patient with most of them, the large majority.
I'll say this too. If you're playing in a shallow league, a 10-team league, I really think you can take a chance because, again, the pool is so much deeper in waivers that you can just go back to it if he doesn't end up making the opening day roster.
Right. Some of these prospects will pop. Some of them will be post-hype players, perhaps, come back and pop in their second stint. But to find out which one is which, you just got to get the draft guide, rotoworld.com/MLB draft guide.